Hello, everybody. I'm open on my phone, but I don't see it yet. So we're just going to go with it. This is Dr. A and Dr. A. Hello, everybody.
Good morning.
Okay, today we're going to be talking about the mother-daughter journey we all live, yes, through the lens of the Demeter and Persephone myth. Oh, there we go. I hear it on my phone. Through the myth of the Demeter, or through the Demeter Persephone myth, which you may have guessed through the image that we put up. We're going to be looking at it from the psychological lens of individuation. That's the primary lens we're going to look through today. Then we're going to get into the socio-political, which may be of more interest to some of you, and we're going to riff on that. And then at the end, we'll riff on the spiritual side, which piques my interest especially. And I might share some of the insights that I wrote about in my book related to this myth. Okay, Dr. A, do you have anything you want to say before we jump in?
No, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Goddess Matters. And yeah, I'm excited to talk about this myth because it's one that I work a lot with a number of my clients who are dealing with a number of midlife issues. So it's a really powerful one, and I think um, there's a lot to be taken from the myth, whether we're looking at it from the perspective of Persephone or today, as we are the perspective of Demeter in the relationship. To mother-daughter, to culture, to all the things we're going to talk about. So I'm excited. It's great.
Yeah, and women's journeys, especially these
Yeah.
journeys that we all have to navigate. So before we jump in, I'm going to remind everybody to like this video, leave a comment, chat with us in the live chat. I assume maybe Zeph is here or he'll be here soon. We love Zeph. He's our biggest fan. We
Yeah.
love you, Zeph. And subscribe to the channel, share with your friends, all that jazz. So, Andrea, let's begin. Do you want to give a summary of the myth and I'll just insert if I think something's missing?
Sure, absolutely. This myth, the most famous version of it, is called the Homeric Hymn to Demeter, from about 700 BCE, and this is attributed to Homer. Um, Basically, the myth is about Persephone, who is the daughter of Demeter and Zeus, and she is a young maiden who is out in the meadow with her other young maiden nubile goddess friends, and they are picking flowers and rollicking through the meadow as all maidens do. When the earth opens up and she is abducted by the lord of the underworld, Hades, and he takes her to the underworld to be his bride and queen of the underworld. And so, as she is being seized against her will, in Hades' chariot with his black stallions, and she's being dragged to the underworld. She's screaming for her mother. She's screaming for Zeus to help her. No one answers. She disappears, and her mother, of course, runs out from wherever she was. I guess where all the mother goddesses maybe were having tea together or whatever they were doing, and can't find Persephone anywhere. Hears her screaming, can't find her. Demeter asks everyone, did you see what happened? Did you see what happened? And everyone says no, but we heard it, but we didn't see what was happening, right? And so then
Yeah, and I'm just going to insert really
yeah,
quickly. It's Hecate, the goddess of the crossroads and the liminal, and she spends a lot of time in the
yeah.
netherworlds, we'll just say that. And Helios, the sun god. So I always think that's interesting. Who does the seeing, in the myth? Who sees or hears?
Yes, exactly. And so um it says in the myth, she seized against her will, put on his golden chariot, drove away. She wept. She cried with a piercing voice, calling upon her father Zeus. Um, she heard it from her cave, Hecate, and the Lord Helios of the sun heard it too. So So Demeter is unable to find, doesn't know what happened to her daughter. She asks around, no one is willing to tell her the truth. And she looks for her daughter for 9 days, right? And nine we know is three times three. It's one of the sacred numbers of transformation,
And
right?
it's also the number of the days of the Eleusinian Mysteries. It took place for 9 days. I
Which
think
which
9 or 9, 10 days. Yeah.
which
Mhm.
is the result of part of the result of this myth ultimately.
Yeah. The
Um,
ritualization of it. Yeah. Mhm.
Exactly. So she looks for her for 9 days, and she's unable to find her. And on the 10th day, which is a number of completion, right? Hecate comes to Demeter and says, let's go and ask Helios because he sees everything. So they go to find Hecate, and he says, well, don't grieve over it. Your beautiful daughter was taken by Hades to the underworld to be his queen, and now she'll be queen of one of the great realms of the gods. And don't complain about it. It's a good match, basically. Don't go-
Yeah.
and
Don't bother yourself, little woman. Just close your mouth.
yes, don't bother the
Just
fact
take
that
it.
your daughter's been abducted by the Lord of the underworld, the realm of the dead, the soul, the dead souls of Greece, and not the Elysian fields, but the realm of the dead. And and by the way, Zeus and Hades are brothers, and Zeus said it was okay. He said, "Sure, take my daughter for your
Yeah.
bride. That's great."
And since he's like father of all the gods, he's in charge. He gets to, make those kinds of decisions.
Yes, yes, he's the head patriarch. Can we
Yeah.
dare to start with that word? And he says, "Oh, take her, and don't worry about it. This was her destiny. This is her lot. This is her fate. This
Right.
is, so don't
And
worry about it."
I want to insert something sociopolitical lean here because I'll probably forget later. So when we talked about this myth in our graduate school course, our first one on Greco-Roman mythology, and we both had Dr. Christine Downing as our teacher. And in my class, I remember her saying when she got to this part of the myth that this may have reflected the actual lived experiences of women in ancient Greece, where we know that especially elite girls were married off at the age of menarche. So at that time, it was about 13, 14. They were married off at menarche to men twice their age. And she told us, as probably was the case in this myth, like we are supposed to know in this myth that Persephone is young, she's a maiden at the early steps of mother, adulthood. We wouldn't consider it adulthood now, but
Yeah,
menarche would have been adulthood then. And she was literally married off to like a man, a fully grown man, Hades, right, and a king. And so in ancient times, women's lived experience that would have happened. And Chris had told us in my memory of this course, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I remember her saying that for many of these young women, they wouldn't have seen their mothers and sisters and friends again, except for once a year at the Thesmophoria, the women-only festival that inverted kind of the typical male-centric, male-dominant rules of ancient Greece society. So she was really trying to get us to understand that this myth reflected what was actually happening in society and what that lived, both the outer lived and inner experience might have been for a young woman such as Persephone and for the mother, which we'll get to when Andre gets to the individuation piece.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, Demeter finds this out, and she is devastated, and she leaves Olympus, right? And she shuns the company of the gods and the lofty Olympus, as the myth says. And she wanders through Greece, and she ends up basically clouding her appearance. She shades her divine beauty and her divine image. She's in despair. She's terribly grieved and saddened, and so she's basically wearing rags and dirty robes, and she looks like an ancient filthy old woman. And she ends up in the city of Eleusis, and she's in the main center of the city, and she sits down by the side of a well, and she just collapses basically into her grief, and in the expression of what we would say of throwing ashes on her head, right? In total grief and abandonment to her grief. And she sits at this well called Parthenion, or the Virgin's Place, where the people of the polis, or the people of the city, used to come to draw water for their homes, right? And so she stays there until she's seen by the daughter of the king or the leader of Eleusis at that time.
Right.
They look at her and they say, "Oh my goodness, a grandmother, honored ancient woman. What are you doing here? Why are you here? Where are you from?" They call her old among humans, right? "Why is your path taking you far away from the polis, from the people? Why have you not drawn near to the palace where there are shaded chambers and there are safe places for women," right?
Mm,
And so then, in a very interesting section of the myth, Demeter then tells a little fabrication of
hmm
who she is and where she came from. And she says um, she was kidnapped by pirates, and that she escaped from the pirates, and that she then began to wander, and she doesn't know where she is or who lives here, and that she wasn't even sure to whose house to go to for refuge or what to do, that type of a thing. So the daughters say, "Oh my goodness, you should come and stay with us. Let us go check with our mother and father." The young girls, there's three sisters, they go back and they find that the mother's like, "Yes." The mother had just had a son very late in life, which she had petitioned the gods for. And so they were looking for a nanny or someone to raise the son. And so they said, "Oh, yes, grandmother, come with us. You can raise our younger brother. And when you raise him to his full manhood, you'll be enriched and everyone will laud your name, and you'll be the beloved among the house of the king." So they all go to the palace, and they bring her in, and she becomes a part of the household, and it is her job then to raise the infant son. And she decides that what she's going to do is she's going to give this infant boy the gift of immortality, and she's tending to him and he loves her, and she's feeding him with the ambrosia of the gods. She's feeding him with her breath, with her divinity, and he's not actually suckling from the breast or taking any mortal food, but she's feeding him the ambrosia of the gods. And every night she takes and she puts him into this divine fire where he is, I would say, metaphorically, right? It's the refiner's fire where the mortal parts of him are burned away and are refined into turning him into a divinity.
Right. I'm going to
Yeah,
insert
yeah,
really quickly
yeah,
too, because Andre and I both reread this myth last night, and so new things always pop up the more each time you read it, and so she, the point you just made that she didn't feed him mortal food, I think, is very prescient too, because wheat was considered a mortal food, and that was her gift, right? Like she was the goddess of grain, right?
yeah.
And so in Hippocrates Women, this scholar Helen King explains that it's the consumption of grain that actually was believed to make humans mortal. It produced the blood in our veins that made us mortal, and the gods themselves didn't eat grain. So grain was purely a human food. So the myth points out that it specifically she does not feed him grain. And I think that that's an interesting hint in the myth of adding to the fact that she's making him immortal.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So, so one of the things that we missed, actually, that I missed in, if we go back a little bit in the sequential telling of the myth, was that when Demeter arrived in the house of the king, that she was very depressed and very sad, and was not interacting, was not partaking of food until Iambe, who is also known as Balbo, right?
Right.
Who is one of the other residents of the king's palace, goes up to her and makes jokes and makes her laugh. And part of the mythological history of this is that Iambe or Balbo actually takes and lifts her skirts over her head, and Iambe is an old woman, and basically flashes her private vaginal parts at Demeter in a sense of saying, you know, let's get some perspective on this. What's important, what's not, and to sort of shock her out of her um, out of her depression. And for whatever reason, however the joke went, whatever Iambe or Balbo said or did exactly, Demeter started to laugh. And
Mm.
that broke the spell of the depression or of the great despair, right? And
But
so
they
that's,
didn't know, but they don't know why Demeter is
yeah, they don't
upset.
know why, but it
Yeah.
broke the spell of the great despair. And actually, Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes talks about that in actually one of the chapters in Women Who Run with the Wolves, chapter 11. She talks about sacred female sexuality. But so anyway, so she's been, the spell of her deep grief has been somewhat allayed or broken. Now she starts tending the young boy, feeding him the food of the gods, and putting him into the refiner's fire every night. And one night, the mother of the young boy has some suspicions, isn't quite sure what's going on because her son is looking more and more godlike and more divine every day. So she decides to go see what's going on in the middle of the night, and she discovers Demeter and standing over her son who is in the flames. And the mother screams and gets hysterical, and Demeter pulls the boy out of the fire and says, "Oh, you foolish mortal woman, you don't know what you did. Now I was going to make your son immortal." And so then Demeter reveals who she is, and that she was in fact going to turn the son immortal, but now that she's been interrupted and that they don't understand the importance of who she is and what's going on, that her son will be honored throughout his life, but now will live and die like any mortal human. And
Right. And I think that we can think of this revelation in the same way that it might be for us. Like for like, let's say a human was an alien. This is a very prescient topic right now. They were
yeah,
disguising themselves as a human, but then they
yeah,
reveal themselves as an alien
yeah,
in that's and like and let's say I'm like a majestic alien. Like I think the text explains her. It's kind of like larger than life. She's luminous. She is physically like bigger than the humans.
mhm,
So I think like the revelation isn't just like, surprise, I'm a god. It's like it's the full power and presence and numinosity of divinity
yes,
that is being revealed.
right. And she cloaked her divinity, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
So she had cloaked it from them. um and Demeter says, ignorant humans, heedless, unable to recognize in advance the difference between future good fortune and future bad. In your heedlessness, you have made a mistake without remedy. I swear by the Styx, the witness of oath the gods make, I say this, immortal and ageless for all days. Would I have made your Philos little boy, and I would have given him Time, that is unwilting, um, a pathos, which is I would have given him honor, respect, personal worth. He would have been beloved and dear, but now there's no way for him to avoid death. Um, so she gives the boy back to them, and she's like, okay, well, whatever. And so, in a sense, she says, now you're going to build me a temple, because she's fully revealed as who she is in Aloysius, in the king's temple. I mean, in the king's castle, in front of the king and the family. She says, build a great temple with an altar at its base, that the entire people will come to, make it at the foot of the Acropolis, make it loom over the well, uh, on a prominent hill, and I will myself instruct you in the sacred rites, so that in the future you may perform rituals in the proper way. And so this is where the beginning of the rituals of death and rebirth are beginning to be put together, obviously, in Aloysius, in the temple there. And so, saying the goddess changed her size and appearance, shedding her old age, and she was totally enveloped in beauty, and a lovely fragrance wafted from her perfumed robes. The radiance of her immortal complexion shone forth from the goddess. So, they the king assembled all the people. He told them they were going to build the temple. So they built the temple. And Demeter sat down in the temple and was her glorious self, but refused to do any of her office, which is the bringing forth of the grain, the bringing forth of life, the fruits, the vegetables, the all the things that that were the bounty of the earth, that fed the animals and the people. And so a famine began to, you know, carry across the land. And this just brings to mind to me also, just this is an aside, is the myth of the Fisher King who's wounded and the land goes into famine. That's, that's in the Grail quest. But
Yeah, I mean, it happens, also in so many myths, and it happens in the Descent of Ishtar, in a
yeah,
way, the companion or the Babylonian companion to the Descent of Inanna. When Ishtar goes underground, copulation of animals and people cease,
yeah,
and there's this idea that that life creative principle is being drawn underground and receding.
yeah,
um so yeah, so there's this idea that when the feminine withdraws down and into the ground, it creates death, decay, maybe drought or famine in an extreme case. Okay,
yeah,
keep going.
yeah,
Sorry.
absolutely.
Mhm.
So so the earth did not send up any seed, and she, with the beautiful garlands in her hair, kept the seeds covered underground. Many a curved plow was dragged along the fields, all in vain. So at this moment, she could have destroyed the entire race of humans with harsh hunger. And so at that point, Zeus begins to see what's happening, and he realizes that if all the livestock die and all the grain and fruit of the earth dies and all the human dies, that there will be no one to worship him. So he finds this to be very distressing idea, and he sends the first of the messengers to Demeter in her temple. And they summon her many times, and she refuses. And so she at first she let's see who he sends first. He sends Iris with the golden
Iris.
wings to summon Demeter to Olympus, right?
Okay, and first of all, I was like picturing this in my mind because in the text it talks about, it says Zeus, who is who is the embodiment of the storm clouds, sends Iris, the goddess of the rainbow, down to Earth, right, to speak with Demeter, the Mitra. And so you can imagine that this was the mythologization of
Yeah.
storms and rainbows, right? And that relationship between the earth, the clouds, and that bridge between them. So I just
Yeah,
wanted to share that.
absolutely. So
Uh-huh.
so she was not persuaded, right? So then it says after that the father, meaning Zeus, sent out all the other blessed and immortal gods. So he sent them all one by one to invite her, to summon her back to Olympus. And they came one by one, calling out to her, offering many beautiful gifts that she could choose for herself if she rejoined the company of the immortal gods, but no one could persuade her. So she refused all of it, right?
Hmm.
This also makes me think of the play, oh, which is the play where the Greek women stop having sex with their husbands.
Lysistrata.
Lysistrata makes me think of the power of women, Lysistrata. So she says no, that she would never go to fragrant Olympus and she would never send up the harvest of the earth until she saw with her own eyes her daughter. So now she starts saying, you want me to make the earth fruitful, you want me to return. This is my negotiation. This is my
Mm.
price. So when Zeus heard this, he said, "All right, I'm going to send Hermes. Hermes, the winged messenger, Hermes, the god of communication, who can cross all the boundaries into the underworld, to the human world, to the heavens, right?
Hmm.
Sometimes the trickster, very rich mythology on his own, sends Hermes to see Hades, not to see Demeter, and says, hey, Zeus would really like you to allow Persephone to come up and see her mom. Like, because Demeter's like holding out and this is not good, and so we need to fix this so that her mother may see her with her own eyes and let go of her anger. So Hermes goes to the underworld and he finds the Lord Hades inside his palace, seated on the funeral couch along with his duly acquired bedmate, which of course is Persephone.
Bedmate, yeah. So we should, yeah, we know what's going on down there.
Yes, yes, right. So she's the
Yeah.
bedmate. So even if she was abducted at this point, it implies that they have had some sort of sexual union, right? The
Yeah.
one who was under duress, yearning for her mother, but it says and suffering from the unbearable things inflicted on her by the will of blessed ones.
Yeah, and
So
let's just emphasize there, like yearning, the text tells us since she's been abducted, she's been yearning for her mother, and things have been done to her that she didn't will to be so.
yes, yes,
Mhm.
yes. So so Hermes tells the story that Demeter's like basically strangling the earth, being unwilling to perform her goddess duties, and that she's sitting in Eleusis in the temple. And so Hades says, "Go, Persephone, to your mother, the one with the dark robe. Have a kindly disposition in your breast, and do not be too upset. Excessively go." Um, but he tells her right before she goes, he says, "Oh, before you go here, have this little, have a few pomegranate seeds. Here, have something to eat. Have this." And so he gives her, um, he says, "High-minded Persephone rejoiced. Swiftly she set out with joy, but Hades gave her stealthily the honey sweet berry of the pomegranate to eat. Peering around him, he did not want her to stay for all time over there at the side of the honorable mother, the one with the dark robe." And so part of the mythology of this story is that once you eat the fruit or the food of the underworld, that you can never leave forever, right? That you
This is
can't
why you and I have the running joke that's like, when you go to the underworld, don't have any food.
don't
Don't
eat
eat food
anything and
down
don't
there.
sit down.
Don't look back.
Don't sit down, don't look back, don't eat anything. Keep
Yes.
moving, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Common themes in many mythic traditions too, not just
yes,
this one. Yeah.
exactly. And go with 3 coins and go with yeah.
Right. And I think, with the pomegranate, when we get to the spiritual interpretation of this myth, maybe I'll talk more about that. But there's something to do with like like fertility, the way that pomegranates were used for fertility, for
Mhm.
reproductive purposes that in real life that are,
Reflected.
translatable mythically in this, yeah,
Yeah.
story.
And then also the look of the pomegranate when you open it up, right? Looks like
Yes.
women's parts. So
Yep.
um so she eats the seed of the immortal world, the pomegranate seeds, and then she returns to see her mother. They're joyfully they're joyfully reunited. Um when Demeter saw them, she rushed forth like a Maenad, which is like a crazed, inspired servant of a god, right? Mainly like of Dionysus, down the wooded mountain slope. And so then, of course, the earth starts to green again. And Persephone says, "Oh, mother, I shall tell you everything." And she tells her the story of what happened to her. But she says, "Oh, I ate the seed of the pomegranate before I returned." Um, there, well, we'll get into the different interpretations of the myth, obviously. So, um, so the earth comes back into fruition. Um, Persephone tells her tale. Hecate welcomes Persephone back. And Zeus says, well, now that she's, eaten the fruit of the underworld, she can't stay out permanently. So she can come home 2/3 of the year and she has to go and reside with Hades as his queen in the underworld for 1/3 of the year. And of course, when Persephone returns, it's the spring, right? That's
Hmm.
that's the whole idea.
Right.
And
So this is clearly on the surface an agricultural myth. We're not going
yes,
to talk about the agriculture so much at all, but
yeah,
that's an obvious interpretation.
yeah, yeah. And so then Demeter returns to Olympus, and um she it says so Straightway she sent up the harvest from the land with rich clods of earth, and all the wide earth with leaves and blossoms. And then she went to the kings and the administrators of the people and showed them and revealed to them the way to perform the sacred rites at Eleusis, right? This is the rite of death and rebirth, which the story of Persephone is basically metaphorizing, right?
Right. Which
Um,
again, we'll talk about more in the spiritual
right. And
interpretation.
the sacred rites, and she pointed out the ritual of the sacred rites of Eleusis to all of them, the holy ritual, which it is not at all possible to ignore. It is not possible to find out about or to speak about. The great awe of the gods holds back any speaking out. And we know that nothing has been written down in history of exactly what happened in those rites. But we do know that those who went through the rite of Persephone and Demeter in the temple emerged from the sacred rite with no fear of death.
Hmm.
So, um,
And you can still visit the sacred
yeah,
site
yeah,
in Eleusis today. It's called Eleusina, where these rites took place. You can sit next to the well or see the well. They might have part of it blocked off. See the
yeah,
well where Demeter allegedly sat. You can go see the cave entrance to, Hades, to the underworld. So all of that stuff is still present, although it's mostly, the foundations, but it's still really amazing to be able to visit it and walk around the place where they held those ancient mysteries.
yeah, exactly. And so that is basically the end of the myth. And it is a really rich one that we can derive um, mythic methodologies for dealing with things that happen to us in our lives. Um, what I call a very personal experience of a universal rite of passage, right? Something like empty nest, something
Mhm.
like the individuation and splitting of mothers and daughters, something
So
like,
we're going to move now people into the psychologizing of this, and we're going to use a depth psychological lens, which is really about, yeah, working through the unconscious, the unconscious, and the conscious, and how to make meaning of these life passages, as Andrea just said, through relating to this myth. So I just wanted to kind of help us transition into that, so people kind of get the path we're walking on.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, we start kind of telling the story and then go from there. Um,
Yeah.
a lot of the work that I do with women in midlife, menopause and postmenopause mostly, with this myth is working around the idea of empty nest, or working around the idea of the schism that often happens between mothers and daughters when the girls get to a particular age where they're trying to, or they're moving into an individuation part of their lives where they're trying to find where their mother ends and they begin, right? Where they're trying to kind of separate themselves from the mother. Oftentimes, young girls who 1 year were very close to their mother and told them everything, and then a year later their mother knows nothing, they tell her nothing, she's annoying, she's stupid, she's whatever, and there becomes this sort of sudden rift as the girl starts to try to figure out who she is in the greater world, and as the mother has to deal with the next stage of her daughter's development, right, that she's watched from birth, right, all the way through all the stages. And and really it sort of fulfills the foretelling that from the moment of conception, or even from the moment of birth, every mother is destined to feel the pain of parting.
Mm,
and and so this myth is about the pain of parting in some ways.
right. Right. When you're looking at it from, well, for both of them really, but
Yeah.
a lot of times the focus is on Persephone's journey,
Hmm.
and Demeter, like when you hear people talk about it today, and Demeter kind of gets seen as like out of touch, clingy, all of these aspects in which she's seen to somewhat hinder her daughter's growth, her daughters. But I think what you're touching on and what I brought up earlier in the actual socio historical context is that moment of, especially in this myth, when mother daughter are separated before they're ready to be separated,
Mhm.
and we don't have any rituals in our current society to help mother or daughter or mother child um, deal with or make meaning of this separation. It just happens, doesn't it? So I really am curious to know how you work with women in that way, how you help them deal with it, from how Demeter's journey helps them understand their own journey.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a very powerful thing, and sometimes there are many different things that become the metaphor for the abduction, right? There can be some sort of trauma, of course. Unfortunately, women do have traumatic things that happen to them. There can be the young girl who makes a bad decision about a boyfriend, who makes a bad decision about getting involved with difficult people. Sometimes children, when they grow up and move out, whatever, they experiment with life, they try different things, they become involved in dangerous lifestyle choices, um, or they, for example, if we look at the trend of or not the trend, but the recent stories about children who have left very conservative religious families and have basically rebelled against that particular tradition and gone out to try to find their own way. Um, so there are many different things that happen in terms of why or how a young girl begins to individuate. It could be something as simple as graduating from high school, going away to college, being gone from home 9 months out of the year. When she comes home after the first year of college, she's independent, she's very different. And the relationship between the mother and daughter is now changed because the daughter has been out in the world. Um, and of
Right,
course,
that the college then serves as kind of that Hades underworld, that netherworld or otherworld place where
right,
she's going to
right.
find different aspects of herself. But
Yeah.
how does that, so then what's the lesson for the mother in that
Well,
instance?
I think in this particular myth, um, the big the first lesson is that this division or this schism or this um, shift um, is normal, natural, and in on some level, not traumatic always, but on some level has to happen in order for the young woman to stand on her own and become her own person and learn who she is and where her integrity lies, where her foundation is, what her meaning, purpose, and belonging is as an individual outside of her relationship to the mother who's raised her. Right.
Mhm.
And so what happens then is sometimes there are different belief systems, sometimes there are different value systems that develop between generations. And so the mother or the Demeter figure generally goes into a period of confusion or mourning for what was and will never be again, right? For loss of that particular relationship, um, for the idea of having to let go of a person who's been in your life every single day for 18 or 19 years now
Mhm.
is not in your home, is
Mhm.
not in your life. A child who you poured yourself into, who you love, who even if it was a rocky relationship, right? Even if it was a difficult upbringing, it's still something that is a very, very big change, right? And mothers, I think, especially want to protect their daughters from things that they can know can go very badly wrong in the
Mhm.
world. because there are bad people in the world. There are bad things that happen in the world. And oftentimes young people are have no concept of mortality, or are very very brave and bold and going out there to try to find their way, and have some sort of a blinder to the fact that nothing bad can or will ever happen to them, right?
Hmm.
And so there's a protective aspect, I think, also, to the child's innocence, to
Right.
to
Especially
the
maybe,
world, you know.
and maybe also especially when it comes to men, because there's a whole learning curve there with young women and men. And I'm sure there's a lot of women who go from the mother's house, the mother father's house, straight to the house of another and to
Yeah,
the arms of a man,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Kind of like Persephone does in this story. And though there is stuff to be much to be gained, and there can be much to be gained and much to be enjoyed, and much to be said for, starting your own family in your own life. There is, to your point, a lot of naivete and hard lessons that can come in that
yeah, yeah.
configuration. Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes, if you have the woman the mother who has a particular idea of what she wants for the daughter, and what she hopes for her daughter, and sometimes that pushes the daughter in the other direction, right? To say, well,
Hmm.
this isn't, I don't want to live my life the way you want to live. I want to explore it my way. I want to do this sort of thing, which can lead to sometimes more dangerous or questionable choices. Um, Not always, but for the mother, it's the grieving process, it's the loss of this purpose, meaning, and belonging, of having poured yourself into this child for so many years, right? Now the child is gone, and so there's a sense of a little bit of a vacuum of identity. Who am I now? I've done this for so long. What gives my life meaning? What gives my life purpose now? And when you see Demeter, who wanders, right? She finds that her daughter is gone, that he's she's in the underworld. She finds that out, and so she leaves Olympus. She leaves the protective, prior, world of where they had all been together, right? She leaves that because it really doesn't exist anymore. Her prior world is now completely dissolved, right?
Hmm.
So the
And
mother's world is completely dissolved. Even if she has other children at home, the relationship with this particular child, right? So her life is fundamentally changed. Her whole environment is fundamentally changed, internally, psychologically. And so she goes wandering in her grief, right? Demeter falls into her grief, right? She doesn't pick up and say, well, this is destiny, and this is she falls into her grief. And until she sits at the well, and she's brought into the home of the king, the palace in Eleusis, and she's given an opportunity to raise another child, and make another immortal child.
it's a male child. I think there is purpose behind the fact that it's a male child and not a female. And I don't have the answers to what that is, but maybe from a Jungian lens, there's something about the balancing of the inner masculine and the inner feminine, where Persephone could represent the inner anima. Yeah, and that this child might be like the underdeveloped animus in a woman's life. Maybe.
Yeah, yeah, possibly that could be too. And
Hmm.
so in a sense, in one way, she instead of trying to reconcile herself to what is,
Hmm.
she decides that she's going to raise another child.
Right.
There's almost like a substitution
Yes.
feeling there, where instead of dealing with the loss, she now just puts her love and care and into this other child. And
Maybe
it's
in some way that people substitute dogs or whatever, dogs or
Yeah.
cats. That's their child.
Well, I guess
Yeah.
that's one way to look at it, right?
Yeah.
And so she throws herself into something, into the nurturing of something, right? And if you look at it for male instead of female, like this is definitely that masculine outer world, creative um energy as opposed to the inner creative, right? The masculine participating, making this great heroic figure, creating this great heroic
Hmm.
masculine figure. So she is interrupted in doing that, and basically in a sense, in some ways it shocks her into reclaiming herself,
Hmm.
her natural self. Now, so she builds her temple, and she still doesn't go back to her former powers, right? She still doesn't go back to her former um essential self of being Demeter, of making the earth, right, fertile, which would have been her, what she should have done before she even gave birth to Persephone, right? This is who
Hmm.
she is. This is her power, what her archetypal function is. So rather than going back to the original archetypal function, she now is returned to herself in a way, and she reclaims her identity, but she won't move off that dime of loss. She
Yeah.
won't move off the dime of grief yet, right? And so
Yeah.
she holds on to that, and she says, you know what? No.
Yeah, because she feels some disrespected or disregarded,
Well, yes,
right?
absolutely. She wasn't consulted. Her husband, basically patriarchally made these decisions, and within the realm of ancient Greece and the role of women in ancient Greece, she is she is being um she's asserting her power in saying that no, you don't get to universally abduct young girls and do whatever you want to do with them at any time without there being any repercussions,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
That the abduction of the the um the nubile feminine, right?
Yeah.
Under, at any time, under the repressive will of the patriarch, right, is is bad for everyone and everything. And
I yeah.
yeah,
I think that that will soon take us into the
yeah,
socio-political current,
yeah,
so
yeah,
let's
yeah.
bookmark that.
Okay,
Yeah.
so she basically refines herself and says, no, I'm gonna advocate one more time here for my daughter, right? I'm gonna advocate one more time for her. And in this advocation, with Persephone returning, with Hades having given her the seed of the pomegranate, she returns knowing that she's going to remain at some point in the year Hades' wife, right? But she returns as now an independent goddess with her own realm, as a queen in her own right.
Hmm.
So Persephone's time and journey through the underworld with Hades is one that is oftentimes seen as representing the individuation, the blossoming of sexuality, the blossoming of individual choices in a young woman's life, right?
Sovereignty and
Uh,
selfhood, something we discussed with Dr. Saffron on another episode
yep,
about the Corey. So if you
yep,
want to hear
yeah,
more about that side, go watch that episode.
yeah. The sovereignty of the Kore, which is the Demeter's
Another,
daughter, Demeter
yeah,
and Kore.
another name for Persephone,
Yeah,
essentially.
yeah.
Hmm.
So that she now returns as an individuated young woman with her own title, with her own sovereignty, with her own kingdom, with her own king, and then they reestablish a new relationship as two women who have gone through processes and growth spaces of individuation, because Demeter also, as the mother, has to learn to reclaim who she is outside of her relationship with her daughter. And then ideally, through the myth, they come back together and they establish a new relationship as two sovereign goddesses.
Right.
So it really shows the idea of how we go through these spaces of change, at least mothers of daughters, right? And it's also from the other side, it's about how the daughters separate from the mother, right?
Right.
And how they
And
get to come back as and create a new relationship from their perspective as well.
And that is the ideal, right? That we will, that during that separation and the girl finds herself and her sovereignty and her selfhood and whatever, all the other things she's finding,
Yep.
that they can come back and recreate a new relationship
Mhm.
together
Yes.
that's not as codependent,
Right.
but
Not
that
as not
honors
as
their
yes,
individual selves.
exactly. Not as too enmeshed, not as codependent, right? But in reclaiming their and reestablishing a new relationship between two sovereign women, they also reclaim their past. They also
Hmm.
reclaim the relationship that they had as mother-daughter, right?
Right. And so I'm just kind of looking at the time and I want to make sure to get to the other lenses as well, at least briefly. But I want to ask you, so when you work with clients, um, how does this myth, when you work on it with them, how does it affect them?
Well, it depends on what the issue is that they're bringing, right? How what the issue is with their own personal situation.
Hmm.
And obviously we take their particular life situation and we look at it in depth in terms of what's going on in the relationship between the two of them and where the tension is, where the strife is, and we break it down that way. And I would say 99% of the women who I work this myth with them about their particular life, with their details and their situation, find that it really gives them a top down, which is what we're always talking about. That myth gives you a top down perspective on your life and on what you're going through. And that by looking at the myth and the parts of the myth and what it reveals to us in human psychology, we can see that we're not the only women who have ever gone through this, and that these myths provide maps as to how to negotiate the difficult psychological shifts that happen during these periods of time. And they
Hmm.
offer a perspective of of new beginnings, right? Of rebirth, just like the Aloysius um, sacred ritual.
Right. So awesome. Let's just, we might go, are you okay to go over a little bit if we go
Yeah,
over?
yeah.
Okay. Me too. So let's just jump into the socio-political then. Like, I think there's an obvious illusion that we've spoken to before that we see in this myth of a young woman being abducted
Mhm.
by, a shadowy, murky underworld male, powerful male figure, right? And obviously, there's a lot being uncovered in our culture right now with regard to the Epstein files and these young, mostly young women, some young boys being abused and trafficked by these murky, powerful underworld male figures. So I think this myth is also speaking to us about our time, this time, and when you and I spoke, we're discussing this myth in relationship to our current moment, our Epstein moment. Um, one of the things that occurred to me is that this myth is the map for how we might move through this current moment because we're still in it. We're still in the underworld. Like the underworld is being revealed. Like right now we're in the stage where Demeter's like, where's my, who knows where my daughter is, right? And
Yeah,
Helios and Hecate are like, well, we heard it or we saw it. And it's like things are being seen. We're being shown right now,
yeah.
but Persephone's still down there. Like, even though, yes, technically, many of these survivors have, are out, many are still in. It's like somehow metaphorically, we're still in that moment where the daughter is in.
Culturally, yes, we're still in the
Yes.
underworld with this abduction phenomenon for sure.
Yeah. So hopefully the myth, if we keep working it, can show us our route out of it. And I don't know what some of those potentials might be. I would love for people in the live in the comments or afterwards in the comments to think about this myth in regard to this current moment and how the myth might help us see our path out.
Yeah. Well, I do see um, I do see sovereignty and power in the women who have come forward, certainly.
Yep.
Um, but
Yep.
in terms of justice and in terms of them being able to reclaim their lives and move on in their own sovereignty, in their own, if we want to call it goddesshood, whatever. I don't think that we haven't gotten to the social justice part of that is going to that's going to bring that to fullness, right?
And I love that you bring up justice because I was actually looking up some of the words last night. Me and Chat, we had a good conversation about some of the words in the hymn.
Yeah.
And justice figures a lot because Themis, which is the goddess of justice, divine order and justice, that word comes up in the myth.
Yeah.
Um, and so I'm just scrolling back. But then I was asking it, well, what about Nemesis? Because Nemesis is also a goddess of justice.
Hmm.
But the way that Chat was describing the difference to me is that here I'm almost there. Nemesis, even though the word nemesis doesn't show up in the myth, it's kind of implied
Hmm.
as so it says Themis represents the underlying order of the universe. Her name literally refers to what is laid down or established. She embodies divine law, sacred custom, social order, justice as a stable principle, the proper relationship between gods and humans. So again, Themis shows up in the myth, Nemesis doesn't, but Nemesis is the force. So it's like the feminine, because Nemesis is a goddess as well. They're both goddesses. Nemesis is the feminine force that restores balance when that order is violated. She's not simply vengeance in the emotional sense, like maybe the Furies or the Urines are the vengeance. Um, Also feminine underworld deities. But Nemesis is righteous retribution, the correction of excess, the correction of hubris, it says, the restoration of equilibrium, and the inevitable consequence of moral imbalance. So, okay, what I'm feeling is this might be a time actually to invoke both of these sacred goddesses because they go hand in hand. At first, I thought maybe they were oppositional, but actually, it's like they're both needed in order to rewrite um, cosmic and societal balance. So maybe what the myth is telling us is that we need to call in um, these goddesses to help us, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. To help us work through this culturally, certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing that I think is so interesting leading up to the resolution is that really Demeter defies all of Zeus's summons, right? She just completely defies uh, returning to Olympus. He sends all of the other 11 or the other 10 gods from Olympus to tell her to come back. She defies all of them. She she just defies her role as the goddess of the grain. She will not bring forth any bounty to the polis, to the people, right?
Yeah,
No
I think
bounty
a
whatsoever.
lot of that probably resonates for a lot of women, right? Whether they're like denying, I mean, okay, I'm about to open a big rabbit hole here, but like denying sex or denying to be the eternal like mother, nurturer, caretaker, like when she's not being respected and she's being objectified or taken advantage of in her family or her relationship, a woman may find her power in denying those things, right?
Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. And
Mhm.
I think that, for Demeter, technically Zeus's wife, to basically, metaphorically put her foot down and say, no, I'm not returning. And the only way I'm returning is if you return my daughter to me, and I will end life. I will not support life. I will not support you. I will not support your sacrificial practices,
Mm-hmm.
any of these things that you
Right.
rely on. And not only am I not going to support it, but when you return her to me, she and I, in that return from the underworld, are going to create an entirely new set of rights that are based in the female divinity on death and rebirth.
Now, this is interesting. So, this is where we're going to segue into this psycho-spiritual here, because Marguerite Riglioso, who's written two incredible books on that in speaking to, in some respects, Demeter and Persephone and Eleusis, she makes the point that she believes the original rites were actually that. They had to do with mother-daughter rights and kind of and parthenogenesis, which means self-birthing, self-create,
Yeah.
or in the literal sense, it would mean being like a female being able to birth without the help of
Impregnate herself. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, impregnate herself and give birth to it. But I think she means that more in the psycho-spiritual sense.
Yeah.
Um, in the way that she's describing it, but she believes that was the original genesis, if you will, of the myth and of the rites, like the pre-Homeric version of the rites, and that later intrusions brought in the masculine. And actually, in different versions of the story, Dionysus, or as the Greeks say, Dionysus, um, he was the underworld figure.
Mhm.
Um, it kind of depends on the version that you're working
Yeah.
with,
Yeah.
and that she brings up in one of her books. If I had it with me, I'd read it directly to you. But basically, in the hymn, you know, the human queen, I forget what her name is, Metanera or something, offers Demeter wine, and Demeter refuses it. She says, "I don't want to drink red wine. I want to drink this barley and mint drink, and with pennyroyal, and it's called the Kikeon." And this was an actual drink that was imbibed by ancient Greeks at parties and stuff. But scholars believe that there was a psychoactive version that
Yeah. A
was used during the
psychotropic.
rites.
Yeah.
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 And so when in the myth, Demeter refuses the red wine and instead asks for the kikeon, um, Marguerite says, well, the red wine is associated with Dionysus and Dionysius rites. And
Mhm.
so that Dionysus was actually brought over from Anatolia and was an intrusion into Demeter and Persephone's sacred rites. And so it's her actually refusing the new rites and saying, I want to stick to the old rites, the old matriarchal
Yeah.
rites of my own, mixed with this
Yeah.
Kikion. Kikion. Sorry, it's spelled different than it's pronounced. That's why I'm like, I have to keep
Yeah.
repronouncing it. Um, and so yeah, so anyway, so she believes, yeah, that this was originally a women's rights about reproduction and not just having kids, but also what is that called when you're trying to prevent yourself from having kids?
Conception.
Yeah, conception, but the opposite, when you're trying to prevent conception
Um,
when you take birth control. So that
yeah.
there was also an element of birth control
Yeah.
in these rites, in which the pomegranate has been shown. So this is where I'm unclear because I've seen people argue that the pomegranate in this myth refers to a form of birth control because pomegranate can be used to control fertility by inducing menstruation. And then I've seen other interpretations in which the pomegranate is used to induce fertility. So I'm not sure what the ancient Greeks may have meant with the inclusion of the pomegranate here. I could go either way, and I've certainly in my head argued for it in either direction. But there does seem to be some kind of inducing of a sexual union here, right? A
Yeah.
sexual union that's creating some kind of rebirth,
Yeah.
right? And that's what as you've already spoken to, that's what the real heart of the myth is the revelation of these divine things and the revelation of the self-actualization of the initiate as they go through this sacred rite,
Yeah.
so that they're not afraid of death, or that they realize their true, I would say their true self,
Yeah.
their spirit self. Um, yeah, I just went on a long
And
tangent. I don't
I
know.
think it also opens the thinking of the doors of initiation for both the mature woman and the young woman, that there are multiple initiations and multiple individuations throughout a woman's life, right? That it's not just when you grow from being a teenager to a householder or whatever, but that
Right.
there are all these different rites of passage and um, psychological stages of growth in the sense of building, developing, or deepening soul, right? In the
Hmm.
in the depth psychological perspective, right? That all of these transformations, right, are rites of passage at all times of life, including and all the way up to death, right?
Right, which I think is speaking to the fact that we need these, what we really are lacking in our society are these sacred rites of passages,
Mm-hmm.
that are so crucial in many, still crucial and used in many indigenous societies around the world. Um, but that obviously are crucial for our development, for the development of our psyche and our soul, and are meaningful for our societies,
Yeah.
because it gets inserted somehow, even if we don't make the time to enact these rituals. Somehow, they show up, like for example, the hazing of young people in college, right?
Yeah.
That is some kind of thwarted rite of passage that
Yeah.
exists because we haven't, instituted it at a cultural level.
Yeah. Some kind of Dionysian Maenad initiation there.
Yeah, but one that's not held in the proper container
Exactly. One that,
because
yeah,
it's denied. Yeah.
that has no um beginning, middle, and end, and so it tends to spin out of control because, yeah, it has no container. And it's that's the thing about mythology, is that mythologies of any particular culture, if we look at them, they provide this sort of um initiatory map of how a human lives their life, going through these particular rituals and rites of passage, from youth all the way through all the changes, and then all the way out to preparing for death, and potentially, depending on the mythology, reincarnation, rebirth, or whatever it is. And so the myths provide this map for negotiating all of these difficult psychological territories and changes that we endure as we live. The collective unconscious, all of these symbolic um, images, ideas, metaphors, mythologies, rites of passage, stages of life, uh, we live them even in our technologically advanced time, and
Right, right.
oftentimes we have no we're not sure how to navigate them, right? We can feel lost or whatever, and these is the maps that the myths provide, I believe.
Yeah, which is why it's really important for us to take myths seriously and also to take rituals seriously. And I think, that's part of the job of the mythologist is to help make them show how they're relevant and find ways to help bring them back into the public discourse, that they're not just fun stories, but they help us make meaning of our lives.
Yeah.
And like you said, help us navigate these different stages because without them, we go into create whatever crazy. We're crazy
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. Well, and it helps us identify patterns culturally, right? All different kinds of things, which are really important to see, um, in terms of where we've been and where we're going, right?
Hmm. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I should say it's not that we're not living out. We are living out different kinds of myth, like the end stages of some of the kind of Abrahamic stories and myths. We're kind of living those out right now in the secular world.
Hmm.
Anyway, without going on a whole other tangent, I think this is probably a good time to start to wrap up. Thank you, Zeph, for being a warrior in the comments. Warriors, maybe the
Yes.
wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
We love your presence here. Thank you, and everyone else that showed up. Thank you so much. Please don't forget to share, subscribe, comment. And next week we're going to have Dr. Joanna back on the podcast, talking about again a follow-up conversation about her book Alien Goddess. I believe we're going to be talking about part one of her book, which is on alien encounters and Marian revelations and anything, everything that's very relevant for
Yeah,
what's
I want to make
happening.
sure I see Steven Spielberg's new movie before we have that conversation, you know.
I know,
Absolutely.
right? Oh my God,
I
me
wish you were
too.
in town so we could go see it together. So,
I know that would be
yeah.
cool. Oh
Yeah.
my God. So yeah, so join us next week. And until then, I guess, thanks everybody.
Yes, thanks everybody.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Ending the